Okay, so are you ready to unpack this this situation in Jamaica surrounding Paula Llewellyn and her position as Director of Public Prosecutions?
Sounds fascinating.
It is. It really is DPP for short.
Oh, okay.
We've got a whole stack of sources here, news articles, court rulings, even some fiery opinion pieces,
Wow.
all shedding light on this legal saga.
And it's a saga with some pretty high stakes, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
We're talking about legal battles, constitutional amendments, whispers of political maneuvering,
Yeah.
all swirling around this one powerful figure.
Yeah, and you might be thinking, okay, Jamaica DPP.
Right.
Why should I care?
Right.
Well, this story isn't just about one island nation
Right.
or one legal position. It raises some universal questions about how justice systems function,
I can see that.
the delicate balance of power in a democracy, and ultimately how much, say, citizens have in the way things are run.
Exactly. It's like a microcosm of issues we see playing out all over the world.
All over the world. So let's start with the central character in all of this.
Okay.
Paula Llewellyn. Who is she, and why has her tenure as DPP been so, let's just say, eventful?
Oh, yeah. Eventful's a good word.
Yeah.
Paula Llewellyn's a seasoned prosecutor who has held the DPP position since 2008.
Wow.
She's basically the top dog in Jamaica's prosecution system, deciding which cases get pursued, how they're handled.
So a pretty significant role.
Very significant.
Yeah, that's a long time to be in such a powerful position.
It is.
I mean, wouldn't that give someone a tremendous amount of influence?
It certainly does.
Yeah.
And that's actually where part of the controversy stems from.
Okay.
See, Llewellyn was supposed to retire back in 2020
Uh-huh.
when she hit 60, the mandatory retirement age for the DPP at the time.
Right.
But she received a 3-year extension,
Oh, so already.
which already raised some
A
eyebrows.
little bit of controversy brewing there.
A little bit, yeah.
And I bet this is where those constitutional amendments come into play.
You're catching on quickly. In 2023, the Jamaican government decided to amend the Constitution,
Got it.
raising the DPP retirement age to 65.
Okay.
Now, on the surface, that might seem like a pretty standard adjustment.
But there's always more to the story, right?
Always. They also slipped in an additional provision allowing the current DPP, guess who,
I'm going to guess Paula Llewellyn.
to choose to stay on even beyond that new retirement age.
Wow.
And this happened just as Llewellyn's extension was about to expire.
That timing seems convenient, to say the least.
It does, doesn't it? And it immediately sparked accusations from the opposition,
Okay.
the People's National Party, or PNP,
Mm-hmm.
who claimed this is a blatant attempt to manipulate the system and keep Llewellyn in power indefinitely.
So this leads us to a question that's really at the heart of this whole debate.
Right.
Should someone be allowed to remain in such a crucial position for an unlimited time,
Yeah.
or are term limits and retirement ages essential for a healthy democracy?
It's a question with no easy answers. Proponents of term limits argue that they prevent the concentration of power,
Yeah.
encourage fresh perspectives, and reduce the risk of corruption.
Makes sense.
On the other hand, those who favor allowing experienced individuals to stay on argue that it provides stability,
Yeah.
continuity, and deep knowledge of the system.
It's a tough one.
Yeah.
But this case really put that debate to the test,
Yeah, it did.
because it landed right in the lap of the Jamaican courts.
And the rulings, well, let's just say they didn't exactly simplify things.
They did not.
In April of 2024, the Constitutional Court issued a split decision.
Okay.
They said increasing the retirement age was perfectly fine,
Yep.
but allowing Llewellyn to choose to stay beyond that was a no-go,
Oh,
unconstitutional.
interesting.
So a partial victory for the opposition, but not a knockout punch.
So round one goes to the PNP.
You could say that. Yeah,
But the fight wasn't over yet?
not even close. The government appealed.
Okay.
And in December 2024, the Court of Appeal completely flipped the script, overturning the earlier ruling.
Completely different.
They said Llewellyn did automatically benefit from that higher retirement age,
Oh, wow.
meaning she could stay put.
What a legal roller coaster.
It is.
It seems like this whole situation really highlights how the law, even something as seemingly straightforward as a retirement age, can be interpreted in very different ways.
It's a perfect example of that, and it brings us to an important concept that's often debated,
Okay.
the rule of law.
Okay.
This principle essentially means that everyone, regardless of their position or power, is subject to the law.
Right.
But as this case shows, applying that principle can get messy,
Yeah.
especially when you have different courts reaching different conclusions.
So many moving parts.
Exactly.
And in the middle of all this legal back and forth, you've got Paula Llewellyn,
Right.
who as of December 24th, 2024, is officially back in the DPP seat.
And she's made it clear that she intends to stay there until she hits that new retirement age of 65.
Which is when?
In September 2025.
Okay, so we know the legal side of things. But what about the public reaction?
Yeah.
How has all this been received in Jamaica?
Well, as you can imagine, public opinion is divided.
Okay.
Some people are relieved to have Llewellyn's experience and steady hand back at the helm, believing it brings stability to the justice system.
But I'm guessing not everyone is thrilled about this outcome.
You're right. There are those who see this whole situation as a manipulation of the system,
Yeah.
casting a shadow over the idea of a fair and impartial justice system.
Right.
They argue that, regardless of Llewellyn's qualifications, the way this was handled raises serious concerns about political influence and the erosion of democratic principles.
So it's not just a legal battle.
No,
It's a societal one, too.
absolutely.
It's about the very principles that underpin Jamaica's democracy.
And this is where those opinion pieces we mentioned come into play.
Okay.
They offer some really fascinating insights into the broader implications of this case.
All right. Let's delve into those opinions.
Oh.
I'm ready to hear what people are really saying about this whole saga.
One piece in particular caught our eye.
Okay.
It doesn't hold back calling this whole affair a blatant power play
Wow.
by the Andrew Holness administration.
Ooh, tell me more. What are the key arguments being made?
Well, the author argues that the government is pulling out all the stops to maintain its grip on power. And keeping Llewellyn in this pivotal position is a strategic move to ensure control over the justice system.
So they're saying it's all about control.
That's the argument.
Yeah.
They claim that Jamaica has no shortage of qualified legal professionals
Right.
who could step into the DPP role.
Yeah.
But the government is actively blocking any change in leadership.
So the argument is that this isn't about Llewellyn's competence?
It's about preserving the status quo,
Yeah.
even if it means bending the rules.
That's a pretty serious accusation to make.
It is, and the author goes even further, suggesting this case reveals a deeper issue
Okay.
within Jamaica's governance. They argue it points to a willingness to disregard democratic norms
Yeah.
and manipulate legal processes to advance a political agenda.
That's a pretty damning indictment of the current administration.
Yeah.
What kind of impact do you think these accusations have on public trust in the government?
It's hard to say for certain, but it undoubtedly sows seeds of doubt
Yeah.
and raises concerns about transparency and accountability.
Right.
When people perceive that the system is being rigged to benefit those in power,
Yeah.
it can erode faith in the entire democratic process.
That makes sense. It's not just about this one case. It's about the bigger picture of how power is exercised
Right.
and whether citizens feel like their voices are being heard.
Exactly.
Mhm.
And this opinion piece also raises a crucial point about judicial independence.
Okay.
The argument is that the government's actions have blurred the lines between political power and the legal system, putting judges in a very difficult position
Right.
and potentially undermining the court's ability to act as a check on the executive branch.
That's a critical point.
It is.
The idea of an independent judiciary is fundamental to a functioning democracy.
Absolutely.
It ensures that the law is applied fairly and impartially, regardless of political pressure.
Precisely, if people lose faith in the courts to make decisions based on the law
Yeah.
rather than political expediency,
Yeah.
that's a slippery slope for any democratic society.
Now, it's important to acknowledge that this is just one perspective,
Right.
one voice in a complex debate.
Sure.
There are certainly other viewpoints within Jamaica, people who support the government's actions and believe that Llewellyn remaining in office is in the best interest of the country.
Absolutely. It's crucial to consider all sides of this story and recognize that there are valid arguments to be made on both sides.
So we've got this legal tug of war,
Hmm.
strong opinions from various corners,
Right.
and a DPP who's firmly planted in her position, at least for now. What does all of this mean for Jamaica moving forward?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
This case has exposed deep divisions and sparked crucial conversations about the balance of power,
Yeah.
the role of the courts, and the meaning of true justice in Jamaica.
Right.
It's forced people to grapple with fundamental questions about what kind of society they want to live in.
It's fascinating how a seemingly straightforward issue, like a retirement age, can become a flashpoint for such profound questions about governance and democracy.
It's a reminder that even in seemingly mundane aspects of government, there are often deeper currents at play.
Yeah.
Currents that can shape the very fabric of a nation.
And it's not just Jamaica, is it?
No, not at all.
These questions about power accountability and the integrity of democratic institutions are being debated all over the world.
You're absolutely right. These are universal challenges that every democracy faces.
Yeah.
Regardless of its size or history.
Right.
How do you ensure that power is used responsibly?
Mm-hmm.
How do you protect the rights of minorities and prevent the tyranny of the majority?
Right.
How do you maintain public trust in a system that's often messy and imperfect? These are questions that humanity has been grappling with for centuries.
It's a lot to consider, but this case study provides a valuable lens through which to examine these larger issues.
It does.
It reminds us that democracy is not a spectator sport. It requires active participation,
Right.
critical thinking, and a willingness to engage in these difficult conversations.
Well said. It's a reminder that we all have a role to play in shaping the systems that govern our lives.
Speaking of systems, remember that video clip we watched about the Supreme Court ruling?
Uh-huh.
It mentioned something else that caught my attention. The retirement age of the Auditor General was also affected by these constitutional amendments.
Ah, yes. And that adds another layer of intrigue to this whole story.
It does.
The Auditor General plays a critical role in ensuring government accountability, but from a completely different angle than the DPP.
So while the DPP focuses on prosecuting criminal cases, the Auditor General is digging into the government's financial records,
Right.
looking for any signs of waste, fraud, or abuse.
Exactly. They both act as watchdogs, but on different fronts.
Yeah.
One's concerned with legal wrongdoing, the other with financial impropriety.
And the fact that these two positions were bundled together in this constitutional amendment raises some interesting questions.
It does, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It makes you wonder if there's a broader strategy at play here, a desire to perhaps control or influence
Right.
both the legal and financial oversight mechanisms of the government.
That's a thought-provoking point. It adds another dimension to this whole affair and makes it even more important for citizens to be informed and engaged in what's happening.
Absolutely. Knowledge is power, and in this case, understanding how these positions work
Yeah.
and the potential impact of these changes could be crucial for safeguarding the integrity of Jamaica's democracy.
So if we were to zoom out and consider the key takeaways from all of this, what would you say are the most important points for our listener to grasp?
I think the Paula Llewellyn case highlights the delicate balance between experience and fresh perspectives in leadership roles. It underscores the importance of clear rules and transparent processes in a democracy.
Yeah.
And it shows how the interpretation of those rules can have a profound impact on the lives of citizens.
It's also a stark reminder that even seemingly routine matters like retirement ages can become battlegrounds for larger questions about power accountability and the very soul of a nation.
And it's a call to action for all of us, no matter where we live, to pay attention to these kinds of cases, to ask critical questions, and to hold our leaders accountable.
Before we wrap up, I want to leave our listener with a thought-provoking question to ponder.
Okay.
If you could design a system for choosing and replacing someone as important as the DPP, what would you do to ensure fairness, competence, and public trust?
That's a great challenge to leave our listeners with.
Yeah.
It encourages them to think critically about how these systems work and how they might be improved.
Because ultimately the health of any democracy depends on engaged and informed citizens who are willing to grapple with these complex issues.
Well said. And on that note, I think it's time to wrap up this deep dive. Thanks for joining us on this fascinating journey into the heart of Jamaican politics and the complexities of democracy.
It really does make you think, doesn't it?
It does.
And speaking of thinking, it's interesting how this entire situation in Jamaica highlights this balance between experience and bringing in new perspectives.
Yeah.
On the one hand, having someone like Paula Llewellyn, with all her years as DPP, could be seen as a positive.
Right.
You know, she knows the ins and outs of the system.
That's true. There's definitely value in experience, especially in such a complex role.
Right.
She's seen it all, navigated countless legal challenges.
Yeah.
And arguably brings a level of stability that someone new to the position might not.
But on the other hand, and this is where those opinion pieces we discussed come into play,
Right.
maybe it is time for a fresh pair of eyes.
Yeah.
For someone with new ideas and a different approach
Yeah.
to step in.
That's the other side of the coin, isn't it? New perspectives can challenge the status quo, bring innovative solutions, and connect with a generation that might feel disconnected from a system that's been run the same way for years.
Right.
It's a classic dilemma with no easy answers.
It feels like we're constantly grappling with this tension between experience and new blood.
Yeah.
Not just in legal systems, but in
Right.
all sorts of institutions,
Yeah.
businesses, politics, even in our personal lives.
It really is.
It's a universal struggle.
And the question becomes, who gets to decide when it's time for a change?
Right.
How do you create a system that balances the value of experience with the need for fresh perspectives?
Yeah.
These are the kinds of questions that keep me up at night.
Me too. It's like trying to solve a Rubik's Cube with way too many sides.
Too many sides.
But before we get completely lost in that philosophical maze,
Right.
I wanted to circle back to something you mentioned earlier about other countries and how they handle these types of appointments.
Okay.
Are there any models out there that Jamaica could learn from?
That's a fantastic question. And it's one that deserves a deep dive of its own.
It does.
There are certainly a wide variety of approaches out there. Some countries rely on parliamentary committees
Okay.
to vet and recommend candidates, while others have independent commissions tasked with ensuring a fair and transparent selection process.
It would be fascinating to compare and contrast those different systems, wouldn't it?
It would.
To see what works well, what pitfalls to avoid,
Yeah,
and maybe even identify some best practices that could be applied in Jamaica.
absolutely. It's always helpful to look beyond your own borders and see how other democracies grapple with these challenges. You might find solutions you never even considered.
Maybe that's our next deep dive project.
Maybe it is.
But for now, let's bring it back to Jamaica. And in this specific case, there's one more detail that we haven't really touched on.
Okay.
And it might add another layer of complexity to this whole story. Remember in that news clip?
Yeah.
It mentioned that the Prime Minister initially rejected Paula Llewellyn's request for a second extension.
Oh, yes. I'd almost forgotten about that little nugget of information.
Yeah.
So it certainly throws a wrench into the narrative that this was all a carefully orchestrated plan from the start.
It suggests that there was some internal disagreement, some push and pull within the government itself.
Right.
It wasn't just a straightforward case of the administration pushing through their agenda without any hesitation.
Exactly. And that raises a whole host of new questions.
It does.
What factors led the Prime Minister to change his mind?
Right.
Was it purely political pressure from within his own party?
Yeah.
Or were there other concerns at play, perhaps related to national security or ongoing investigations?
It makes you wonder about the internal dynamics within the Jamaican government.
Right.
Are there factions within the ruling party that hold differing views on this issue? Are there power struggles happening behind closed doors that we're not privy to?
It's like a political thriller unfolding right before our eyes.
It certainly adds an element of suspense. And this is where having access to more sources, like insider accounts or in-depth political analysis, would be invaluable.
It would.
It would allow us to piece together a more complete picture of what's really going on behind the scenes.
For sure.
It's like trying to solve a puzzle with only half the pieces.
Right.
We might never know the full story,
Yeah.
but it's fascinating to try to connect the dots
It is.
and speculate about the motivations and machinations at play.
Absolutely. And that's part of what makes this case so compelling.
Right.
It's not just a dry legal matter. It's a human story filled with political intrigue,
Yeah.
personal ambitions, and maybe even a touch of Shakespearean drama.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into the saga surrounding Paula Llewellyn, I think the key takeaway is that things are rarely as simple as they appear on the surface.
Right.
What started as a seemingly straightforward retirement decision
Yeah.
spiraled into a complex web of legal, political, and ethical considerations, exposing fault lines within Jamaica's democracy and sparking debates about fundamental principles of governance.
It's a reminder that we should always dig deeper, question assumptions, and seek out multiple perspectives.
Yeah.
The world is full of nuances and complexities,
Right.
and it's our responsibility to engage with them thoughtfully and critically.
Well said. And it's also a reminder that we as citizens have a role to play in shaping the future of our societies.
Absolutely.
By staying informed, engaging in meaningful conversations, and holding our leaders accountable,
Yes.
we can contribute to building a more just and equitable world.
It's a continuous process, a journey of learning.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you found it insightful and thought-provoking.